Good morning. My name is Richard Kraneis, and today's YouTube episode is regarding Microsoft SharePoint for nonprofits. First of all, a brief introduction on myself. Who is Richard Kraneis? I am a business analyst, project manager, and SharePoint evangelist in Chicago, Illinois, USA. I am a trainer of 10,000 people in the classroom, but all that matters today is how well I train you, how well I inform you. More information is at the end of this YouTube video. So, let's take a look at our learning objectives for today. What is Microsoft SharePoint? And the phrase Microsoft SharePoint costs are, no, they're not expensive. They can be reasonable. And the other learning objective, does your nonprofit really want to work together? So, what is Microsoft SharePoint? It's not software like Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so forth. Microsoft prefers to call it a service. It is a collaborative tool that helps remote personnel work better as a team. You can certainly use it all in one office where you're spread out in a building, but where it really shines is when you have folks that are remote, like a nonprofit that has half a dozen sites in Chicagoland, or half a dozen sites in Illinois, or half a dozen sites in the world. And to help you with this, here's a demo, some brain food, for what you could do with Microsoft SharePoint Foundation 2010, which is the free version of Microsoft SharePoint. So to do this, I'm going to open up one of my websites. Microsoft SharePoint Foundation and Standard and Enterprise and other versions of SharePoint are done normally done on the internet. So here I'm just launching. It is password protected. You could launch it from home. You could launch it from one office, from another. And it's going to my Microsoft SharePoint Foundation 2010 site. Once again, the software is free for this. Hosting it costs a bit more, but it's very reasonable at the low levels. To give you a taste of what you could use this for in terms of your nonprofit, I'll go to one of my sites. Now, this is not a nonprofit. It's just a sub-site that I built called PMP, which stands for Project Manager Professional. It is a site that I built to support some PMP students of mine who are studying project management. So this is a very typical, I think, SharePoint site. You have shared documents, for example, some of the functionality here on the left side. So I have all these documents that were loaded, and they are Excel and PowerPoint and Word. And if I wanted to work on a document, I could, open it up, or I could check it out, which means if I check it out, it cannot be changed by another person while I'm working on it, and then I would check it back in. So you certainly have libraries. You also have calendars. So I have a calendar here. There's just a few notes on it. And what I can tell you about calendars is that you can build one calendar for a department. You could build one calendar for various departments, and you can also merge them. Here I'll take a look over at discussions. There's a discussions group page, and these are different discussions. I'm not going to go into them because they pertain to my group. But you could have discussions from a nonprofit standpoint in terms of how will we find more supporters, more volunteers. How do we better, serve our clients? How do we do better inventory control? And when you open it up, you would find a discussion that has been carried on that you have built. Now, you can also have links on pages, and here I have links to some pages that are beyond my website. I'm not going to go into them, but you could link to those. You could also have a blog. Whoops, let's go back here. You could build a blog where you could carry on discussions regarding your nonprofit, the different groups that you're in. So these are all blogs, and they're private. They're not available to the public. You could make them available to the public, but in this case, they're private. So let's return to home for a second and show you some more functionality. Now, where I think this really gets interesting is in the types of objects that SharePoint can give you. Now, obviously, you've used Microsoft Word and Excel and PowerPoint, and you know that when you launch Microsoft Word, they have templates for building a resume or a thank you letter, they have pre-built templates. Now, in a similar fashion, Microsoft SharePoint has things that are very close to that. For example, when I go through Site Actions and I ask to have a new site, it provides a variety of objects. And I'm not going to go into each and every one of them, but I just wanted to touch a few. What we've done so far, this has been a team site, some of the things that I've shown you. You could have a meeting that you're planning where you could have a template that would help you with that. Perhaps you have a large decision that needs to be made for your nonprofit, and the decision needs to go back and forth and needs review. You could use a decision meeting workspace. What else could you do? You could have a blog. I showed you my blog earlier, so you could build a blog for your nonprofit. You could have different databases that are built in to Microsoft SharePoint. You could have an absence and vacation schedule. You could have context management, where perhaps you keep track of your volunteers. You could do event planning for the large event that you plan once a year, where you depend on so much of your income coming in. You could also have inventory tracking if your nonprofit does have a lot of items in inventory. What else could you do? Job requisition and interview. It's all pre-built for you. Doesn't mean it's done in a snap, but it gives you a basis for doing things. What else? A knowledge base. Perhaps your nonprofit depends a lot on knowledge that has been acquired through experience, perhaps in helping children, and what you've learned in that process of dealing with wards of the state, if that's the correct phrase. You could also keep track of your assets if you have lots of physical assets for your remote sites. You could also do budgeting. And one of my favorites, you could do project tracking workspace. If, for example, you run a charter school program in Illinois and you're adding a new charter school, you could actually keep track of it in this fashion. And that's about it. There's many things it could do for you. Those are just some of the large objects that you could choose to help build things faster with Microsoft SharePoint. So that's a long demo on what Microsoft SharePoint can do for you. And when you're finished with it, you log out. So I'm signing out. This is for security purposes. So you log in and you do things safely, and then you log out. But let's return to this to our outline to center ourselves more. You've had a demo of Microsoft SharePoint. So let's move on for a little bit. At a recent conference, it was a project manager conference. I think it was for PMI Chicagoland. I was speaking about SharePoint, as I often do, with the people that I meet. And a gentleman walked up to me, and after listening to SharePoint, he said, "Only medium to large organizations can afford Microsoft SharePoint." Well, I said, well, I don't believe that's totally correct, because I have Microsoft SharePoint, and it cost me all of $8.95 a month. So he didn't say anything to that. He just politely nodded his head. That was the end of the conversation. But let me say that costs range from inexpensive to very expensive. It all depends on you. It depends on the breadth and scope and depth of what you want to do with Microsoft SharePoint. Now, I can tell you this quite clearly that the Microsoft SharePoint site that I showed you was SharePoint Foundation 2010, and it was built on the cloud, and all I pay is $8.95 a month for this website hosted on the cloud. And as I recall, the vendor that I used allows me up to 1,000 users. So that is that's pretty cheap. Now, the build cost, having someone who's knowledgeable who can build this, that's a different story. So you can find volunteers who can do this. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this video. Or you can train up your staff so they can do this. So this is another part of our learning objectives. Does your nonprofit really want to work together? I think that's really the question. What's the hardest part about Microsoft SharePoint? Based on what I've seen so far, after using SharePoint for 3.5 years, 3 years as a power user and 6 months building my own site, I believe the most difficult thing is getting your staff to use Microsoft SharePoint. This is called adoption. Now, very clearly, if your key stakeholders want and support Microsoft SharePoint at your nonprofit, then your staff will follow. Well, they'll still need encouragement, but good leadership can promote the use of Microsoft SharePoint. Otherwise, it's just more technology that's just available to you that's not doing anything. So, why am I doing all of this? My name is Richard Kraneis, and as of today, I am actively promoting Pro Bono SharePoint. Pro Bono SharePoint means that I will have a website named Pro Bono SharePoint, and it's to encourage nonprofits to use Microsoft SharePoint, which is a wonderful tool. So that's the main reason for doing this interview. Sorry, for doing this YouTube video. So, thanks for visiting today. I hope you had fun learning. I had fun teaching you or informing you. And your comments and criticisms are welcomed. And I certainly hope that you will join YouTube and subscribe to my channel. Just a little bit more on myself. My name is Richard Kraneis, and I have a unique name, and so I've decided to treat it as a unique brand. I am the only Richard Kraneis in the US or anywhere. I've never found anybody that has my name. There's a few Kraneises that are out there, but only one Richard Kraneis. So my name is my brand. And my intention, as I've done for several decades, 2 or 3 decades, is to provide value to my IT customers and clients through positive collaboration. And now that SharePoint exists, it makes it even easier. And I seek to do all of this with a sense of honesty and a sense of goodwill. So, if you're interested in SharePoint BA or PM support in Chicago, Illinois, USA, or beyond, your LinkedIn inquiries are welcomed. Thanks again for visiting. Have a wonderful day. Consider using Microsoft SharePoint. It's great stuff. My name is Richard Kraneis, and I offer you my best wishes from Chicago, Illinois, USA.